38,000 feet of altitude. An Airbus A320 is descending very fast, without permission from air traffic control and without any explanation. Germanwings, confirm altitude, the controller calls out. Silence. Inside the aircraft, the captain stands at the cockpit door. He can't get inside. He punches in his code. The door stays locked. His heart races. He knocks. "Andreas, open the door." No response. The engines change pitch. The nose tilts forward. Through the window, he can see the French Alps rising up to meet them. He finds an emergency axe. Metal slams against metal. His hands blister. His voice cracks. "Open the door! Open the door!" Inside the cockpit, the first officer sits alone, breathing calmly, staring straight ahead, his hand on the controls, the door locked from the inside. 150 souls on board, 16 high school students returning from an exchange trip. What drives a pilot to do the unthinkable? Can anyone stop what's about to happen? This is the haunting story of Germanwings Flight 9525.
I am Captain Jack Mercer. What you're going to watch now is the story from the perspective of a pilot who has lived and seen a lot in 25 years of experience. Welcome aboard.
So, today it's March 24th, 2015, Tuesday morning. We are at Barcelona's El Prat airport. It's busy with the usual flow of travelers. At gate 101, Germanwings Flight 9525 is preparing for departure, a routine flight from Barcelona, Spain to Düsseldorf, Germany. The aircraft is an Airbus A320 with over 47,000 flights behind it. Reliable, well-maintained, nothing unusual about it at all. 150 passengers board the aircraft. Among them are 16 high school students from a small town in Germany, returning home after an exchange program in Spain. They're excited, taking selfies, texting friends. One of them, 16-year-old Elena Bless, sends a message to her friend, "I'm on my way home." 2 teachers accompany the students. There were also couples on vacation, business travelers, retirees. Just ordinary people on an ordinary flight. But, unfortunately, this is not going to be an ordinary flight. In the cockpit, 2 pilots prepare for departure. Captain Patrick Sondenheimer, 34 years old, sits in the left seat. He's a father of 2 young children. Experienced, professional, with nearly 7,000 total flight hours. Of those, more than 3,800 hours are on the Airbus A320, with 259 hours as a captain. For this flight, he's assigned as pilot monitoring. In the right seat is First Officer Andreas Lubitz, 27 years old. He has just over 900 total flight hours, with 540 of them on the A320. Today, he's the pilot flying. Now, let's talk about the First Officer, Andreas Lubitz, because his story is critical to understanding what's about to happen. From childhood, Andreas dreamed of flying. It wasn't just a dream. It was an obsession, At 14, he joined a local gliding club. By 16, he had his glider license. Flying was everything to him. In September 2008, he started basic training at Lufthansa's flight school in Bremen, northwestern Germany. His instructors called him a natural, above standard performance and dedicated. Very skilled, we can tell, right? But, my friend, beneath that success, something was breaking. Andreas developed severe depression and insomnia. He consulted a psychiatrist and was prescribed antidepressants. His pilot training was halted. His medical certificate wasn't revalidated because of his condition and the treatment he was receiving. So, for someone whose entire identity was built around flying, this probably was devastating. Agree?
After months of treatment, his mental health improved. By late July 2009, he was granted a new Class 1 medical certificate, allowing him to return to flight school. But it came with a critical condition. If he suffered a relapse into depression, the certificate would be revoked immediately. Which makes sense, right? So, he continued his training in Arizona, USA, passed his exams, worked as a flight attendant for Lufthansa while finishing his pilot training, and by late 2013, obtained his A320 type rating. He joined Germanwings and by June 2014, became a first officer. Well, when researching about him, I found out that throughout his career, he impressed everyone to be true. His performance reviews were consistently above standard. But, unfortunately, By late 2014, his mental health began deteriorating again. He developed vision problems, flashes, halos, floaters. He became convinced he was going blind. He saw over 40 doctors, neurologists, ophthalmologists, psychiatrists. None could find a physical cause. They told him the problem wasn't in his eyes, it was in his mind. So he was diagnosed with hypochondria and signs of psychosis. Doctors issued sick notes. One even recommended hospitalization. But Andreas knew that if Germanwings found out, he'd be grounded forever. And he really needed to keep his job because if he couldn't fly, he couldn't repay his student loans. I mean, his entire life would collapse. What did he do? Well, he hid everything. He threw away the sick notes, he lied, and he kept flying. You know, this is where the system failed. Catastrophically, in my opinion. Patient confidentiality meant the airline had no idea what was happening. Andreas Ludwitz was mentally unfit to fly, and nobody in authority knew. And here we are, March 24th, 2015, and he's in the cockpit of an Airbus A320 with 150 people behind him. And yes, a huge disaster is on their way. So it's 9:01 a.m. local time. The engines roar to life. Flight 9525 lifts off from Barcelona, climbing into a beautiful blue morning sky above the Mediterranean Sea. The departure is picture perfect. Clear weather, smooth air. The aircraft climbs steadily, crossing into French airspace. Inside the cabin, passengers settle in. Some read, some sleep, some chat with seatmates. The students laugh and joke, already planning what they'll do when they get home. But sadly, none of them will arrive at home. In the cockpit, the two pilots go through their procedures. Professional, calm, everything by the book. But something strange happens during this climb. Something nobody will understand until later. At one point during the ascent, Captain Sundenheimer steps out of the cockpit briefly. While he's gone, Lubitz reaches forward and adjusts the altitude selector. First down to 100 feet, then up to 49,000 feet, far beyond the aircraft's ceiling, then back to 37,000 feet.
The autopilot doesn't respond because the aircraft is in a different mode. The plane continues climbing normally. Nothing happens. But this wasn't a mistake, my friend. This was a rehearsal. I think Lubitz was testing, learning, memorizing exactly how the system worked. Why I believe he was doing it? Because 4 days before this flight, investigators would later find evidence that Lubitz had been studying the A320's cockpit door locking system. Manuals, videos, override procedures, fail-safes, he'd memorized everything. So, I have no doubt that he knew exactly what he was going to do. He'd planned it, practiced it, and now he was just waiting for the right moment to put his plane to work. What plane? Well, stick here with me. So, around 9:30 a.m., Flight 9525 reaches its cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. The flight is smooth, weather is clear, some clouds below at 32,000 feet, but nothing significant. Winds from the southwest at about 40 knots. In the cockpit, Captain Sondenheimer leans back in his seat. It's been a hectic morning. The inbound flight from Düsseldorf to Barcelona was delayed. He didn't even have time for the basics. Wow, what a hectic morning, he says to Lubitz. Didn't even get a chance to hit the restroom. Go ahead, Captain, Lubitz replies calmly. We're settled now. I'll take it from here. Okay. Can you also review the approach charts and weather for Düsseldorf, please? Sure, Lubitz says. Hopefully. So Captain Sondenheimer leaves the cockpit and the door closes behind him. And from this moment on, my friend, absolutely everything changes in this story, as you will see now. It's 9:30 a.m., and Lubitz is alone in the cockpit, exactly where he wants to be. He reaches for the door lock switch and flips it from normal to lock. From this moment on, nobody can enter the cockpit. Not with the standard code, not even with the emergency override code. You know, after September 11th, 2001, reinforced cockpit doors were designed to keep hijackers out. But my friend, today those same doors are keeping a hijacker in. Lubitz leans forward. His eyes are cold, focused. He reaches for the altitude selector and turns it all the way down to 100 feet. The autopilot responds instantly. The engines ease back to idle. The nose pitches forward slightly. The Airbus A320 begins descending toward the mountains below.
Now 9:30,
9:53 a.m., just 30 seconds after the captain left, the aircraft starts its descent. And where is Captain Sondenheimer? The captain right now is in the restroom, and he notices the engine tone has changed, the nose attitude has shifted. He realizes that something's not right. At cruising altitude, the plane shouldn't be descending, right? So immediately, he heads back to the cockpit. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away at Marseille Air Traffic Control, France, an alarm flashes on a controller's screen. An aircraft under his control is descending without clearance. The air traffic controllers are watching the plane descending. 37,500 feet, 36,500 feet, 35,500 feet. Something is wrong, they know. Planes at cruising altitude don't just drop, not without permission, not without a reason. So the controller keys his radio. Germanwings 9525, confirm altitude 38,000 feet. Silence. Outside the cockpit, Captain Sondenheimer reaches the door. He punches in his code, the standard entry code that every pilot uses. A bell should ring inside the cockpit, alerting Lubitz to unlock the door. He stands at the door, waiting. Nothing. Confused, he punches the code again, more firmly this time. The door doesn't budge. Inside the cockpit, Lubitz stares at the door monitor. He can see the captain outside, but he doesn't move, doesn't react, just sits there, breathing calmly. It's 9:33 a.m. and Marseille Control tries again. Germanwings 9525. Radar shows you in rapid descent. Confirm altitude and intentions. No response. The captain knocks on the door. Andreas, open the door. Nothing. He knocks harder. The altitude warning alarms are sounding now, louder, sharper. Andreas, more urgent now, still nothing. I try to imagine what was going on inside the captain's mind at that moment. At that moment, he already knew that something was very wrong. In his place, I would be asking myself, is the first officer unconscious? Has he suffered a medical emergency, a heart attack, a stroke? But, if Lubitz were unconscious, the door would still respond to the emergency override code. So the captain punches in the emergency code. In 15 seconds, the door should unlock automatically. A failsafe designed for exactly this kind of situation. He counts. 10 seconds. 15. 20. The door stays locked. The captain knows that the emergency override can only fail if someone inside the cockpit has manually locked the door. And that's when he probably realizes, this is bad. This is very, very bad.
Now, 9:33 a.m., inside the cockpit, Lubitz adjusts the speed selector. He increases the target speed to 308 knots. The aircraft accelerates. The descent rate increases, fluctuating between 1,700 feet per minute and 5,000 feet per minute. Nobody in the cabin realizes what's happening yet. The descent feels smooth, normal, just another part of the flight, But at Marseille Control, the controllers are becoming alarmed. The aircraft has dropped nearly 2,000 feet below its assigned altitude and continues descending. Germanwings 9525, Marseille Control Center, what cruise level were you cleared for? Silence. They switch frequencies. Germanwings 9525, Marseille Control Center, please confirm what cruise level you're cleared for. Nothing. They try 3 more times in 30 seconds. No response. But here's what's chilling. Pay attention. On the cockpit voice recorder, you can hear breathing. Calm, steady breathing. Lubitz is there. He hears every single call. He's just not answering. It's 9:34 a.m. and Lubitz increases the speed again to 323 knots. Outside the cockpit, Captain Sondenheimer slams his fist against the door. He kicks it again. The door is bulletproof, reinforced. It doesn't even dent. A buzzer sounds, the captain pressing the entry button repeatedly. Lubitz doesn't react. He just sits there, watching the monitor, watching the captain's desperate attempts. The intercom buzzes. The captain is trying to call him 4 times. Lubitz doesn't answer. Now, 9:35 a.m., and Lubitz adjusts the speed to 350 knots. This is the aircraft's maximum operating speed. The plane accelerates further. The descent steepens.
Sondenheimer's eyes are wild now, desperate. He sees it through the small window, the altimeter spinning down, mountains visible ahead through the windscreen. They're dropping fast, too fast to be true. He spots the emergency axe in its cabinet. He grabs it, swings it hard against the door. Metal slams into metal. A massive bang echoes through the aircraft.
When he is doing it, passengers hear the banging. They hear the captain shouting. They see the desperation on his face through the small window. They realize something is terribly, horrifically wrong. And that's when panic spreads through the cabin. "Open the door, Andreas, please!" He swings again. His hands blister, his muscles burn, but the door doesn't open. The 16 students in the back are terrified now. Some are crying, some are calling their parents, leaving voicemail messages saying goodbye. Parents clutch their children. Couples hold hands. Some passengers pray. Others just sit frozen, staring at nothing. One passenger later found in the wreckage had been writing a farewell note to his family. Marseille Control is trying everything. They switch to emergency frequencies. They ask nearby aircraft to attempt contact. Nothing works. At a French Air Force base, sirens erupt. 2 fighter pilots sprint to their jets, engines ignite. The fighters tear into the sky, racing to intercept Flight 9525. Will they be able to intercept the aircraft and prevent a tragedy? Now, 9:38 a.m. The aircraft descends below 10,000 feet. The mountains are huge now. Close. Too close. Inside the cockpit, the ground proximity warning system activates. Terrain ahead, pull up. Terrain ahead, pull up. Captain Sondenheimer is screaming now, voice cracking, sobbing. "Open the door now! Open the goddamn door!" But Lubitz sits in the cockpit in silence. His breathing remains calm, steady. He makes no attempt to respond to the warnings, no attempt to pull up, no attempt to save the aircraft. It's clear that he's committed. This is what he came here to do. It's 9:39 a.m., and the aircraft drops below 7,000 feet. The GPWS is screaming continuously now. "Terrain ahead, pull up, pull up!" The captain swings the axe one last time. One final desperate attempt, but it's hopeless. The door was designed to withstand exactly this kind of attack. Through the cockpit window, the Alps fill the entire view. Rocky peaks, snow-covered slopes. Seconds away now.
At 9:43 a.m., the unbelievable happens. Germanwings Flight 9525 impacts the side of a mountain in the French Alps at approximately 430 miles per hour. The impact is so strong that the aircraft disintegrates instantly. Fragments scatter across the mountainside. The impact creates a debris field spanning hundreds of meters. Sadly, all 150 people on board, 144 passengers and 6 crew members, die instantly. The 16 students, the 2 teachers, the young couples, the retirees. Captain Patrick Sondenheimer, who spent his final moments desperately trying to save everyone, and Andreas Lubitz, who spent his final moments ensuring nobody would survive. The crash site is almost unreachable. It's high in the Alps, steep terrain, accessible only by helicopter. Rescue crews arrive within an hour, but there's nothing to rescue. No survivors, no intact bodies, just wreckage scattered across the rocks. French military jets arrive minutes later. They circle the site, but there's nothing they can do. When investigators recover the cockpit voice recorder days later and listen to the recording, they're not prepared for what they hear. No mayday, no final words, no struggle. Just the sound of one man breathing calmly while another man outside screams and begs for his life. And then, at 9:43 a.m., the recording ends. Here's the question. How could a pilot with a totally dysfunctional mind be able to easily enter a cockpit and execute a fatal plan without anyone being able to stop him? Who's to blame? The pilot? The air company? The system? To answer these questions, I had to make a deep investigation. Now I'm going to share with you what I found out. So actually, this wasn't a mechanical failure. This wasn't weather. This wasn't a navigation error. This was deliberate mass murder carried out by a pilot who exploited every system designed to keep passengers safe, right? So let me break down what went wrong from my perspective, and let me know if you agree with me on comments, okay? First, the mental health system failed catastrophically. Andreas Lubitz was severely mentally ill, experiencing psychotic episodes, convinced he was blinding, prescribed multiple medications, including antidepressants and sleeping aids. Doctors had issued sick notes declaring him unfit to fly. Researching for this episode, I found out that one doctor even recommended hospitalization. But because of patient confidentiality laws, none of this information reached Germanwings or Lufthansa. The airline had no idea their first officer was mentally unstable and actively suicidal. I also found out that when Lubitz applied for his FAA medical certificate during training in the United States, the application asked, "Have you ever been treated for mental health issues?" He checked no. Yes, he lied. And that lie was never discovered until 150 people died. I mean, the entire aviation medical certification system relies on pilots being honest. But what happens when they're not? What happens when someone is willing to lie to protect their career, right?
Second, the cockpit door system, designed to prevent terrorism, became the weapon used to commit it. After 9/11, reinforced cockpit doors were mandated worldwide. They're bulletproof, axe-proof, nearly indestructible. The emergency override code exists so crew members can enter if the pilots are incapacitated. But that override can be blocked by the pilot inside simply switching the door control to lock. This feature was designed to prevent hijackers from forcing crew members to open the door. But Lubitz used it to lock out his own captain while he crashed the plane. I think this is a fundamental design flaw. The system assumed that the threat would always come from outside the cockpit. It never considered that the threat might come from inside, right? Third, the two-person rule wasn't in place. In many countries after 9/11, regulations required that two people must be in the cockpit at all times. If one pilot leaves, a flight attendant enters. This prevents exactly what happened here. One person alone in the cockpit with total control. But in 2015, this rule wasn't mandatory in Europe. Germanwings didn't enforce it. So when Captain Sondenheimer stepped out to use the restroom, Lubitz was left completely alone. Fourth, there was no real-time monitoring system that could have detected what was happening. The aircraft was descending rapidly without clearance. ATC was trying to contact them with no response. The captain was locked out of his own cockpit, but there was no system in place to alert authorities or allow remote intervention. This is such a sad story in all aspects of it. Lubitz was deeply mentally ill, facing the loss of everything he'd worked for his entire life. He knew he was about to be grounded permanently. He knew his career was over. And I can't help feeling sorry for him. But at the same time, I remember that instead of just ending his own life, he decided to take an entire aircraft full of people with him. 16 children who'd done nothing wrong. Teachers, families, couples celebrating anniversaries, all murdered because one man couldn't cope with his mental illness. The investigation found that Lubitz had researched cockpit door systems for days before the flight. He'd practiced during the outbound leg to Barcelona. He'd planned every detail. This was premeditated, calculated, cold-blooded, I think. On the morning of the flight, a torn-up doctor's note was found in his apartment, excusing him from work that very day. He ignored it. He showed up for the flight anyway.
You know, the scariest part for me is how easily he did it. He exploited gaps in the medical system. He lied on applications. He hid his medications. He studied security systems. He waited for his moment, and then he executed his plan perfectly. The cockpit voice recorder captured his breathing throughout the descent. Calm, steady, never panicked, never hesitant. He ignored the captain's screams. He ignored the GPWS warnings. He ignored ATC. He just sat there and flew the aircraft into a mountain. This tragedy exposed fundamental weaknesses in aviation safety: mental health screening, cockpit security, medical confidentiality versus public safety. The two-person rule, all of it failed. And in the end, 150 people paid the price. But did these people die in vain? Has anything been done after Germanwings Flight 9525 disaster to prevent this from happening again? Here's what I found out.
First, the two-person cockpit rule was implemented across Europe almost immediately. Many airlines had already been using it, but now it has become mandatory. If one pilot leaves the cockpit, a flight attendant must enter. Nobody is ever alone at the controls. However, my friend, and this is important, many airlines have since quietly rolled back this requirement. They argue it's unnecessary, expensive, and creates other security risks. The rule is no longer universally enforced, which is concerning. What do you think about it? Do you think that the two-person rule is important or not? Second, psychological evaluations for pilots were enhanced. Airlines began conducting more frequent mental health screenings. Random drug and alcohol testing became standard. Aeromedical examiners faced stricter oversight to ensure they weren't just rubber-stamping medical certificates. Third, medical confidentiality laws were re-examined. The balance between patient privacy and public safety became a major debate. Some countries implemented systems where pilots could report mental health issues confidentially without automatically losing their jobs. The goal was to encourage pilots to seek help rather than hide problems. Fourth, a European aeromedical database was proposed to track pilot medical history across borders and airlines. This would prevent pilots from doctor shopping or hiding issues by moving between countries. Fifth, pilot support programs were established. One reason Lubitz didn't report his worsening depression was fear of losing his job and facing financial consequences. He had massive student loans. No income meant bankruptcy. So airlines created support networks to help pilots dealing with mental health issues make informed decisions without fear of immediate career destruction.
The lesson for the aviation industry? Technology and security systems are only as good as the humans using them. You can build the strongest door in the world, but if the threat is inside the cockpit, that door becomes a weapon. The lesson for pilots? Mental health matters. If you're struggling, seek help. Don't hide it. Don't lie about it. The consequences of not getting help can be catastrophic, not just for you, but for everyone who trusts you with their lives. The lesson for passengers? Well, after watching this episode, maybe you don't believe it, but aviation is still incredibly safe. This was an extremely rare event. But yes, it's a reminder that safety requires constant vigilance, continuous improvement, and a willingness to learn from tragedies. Now, let me tell you one more thing that I found out after researching for this episode. Something very beautiful and positive emerged from a tragedy. Captain Patrick Sondenheimer's wife founded a foundation in his memory, dedicated to helping children and young people navigate grief and crisis. Patrick spent his final moments courageously trying to save his passengers. He deserves to be remembered as a hero, right? Okay, if this story touched you, please hit that like button and share the story. I am Captain Jack Mercer. Thanks for flying with me today, and see you on the next flight.